now listening to Protecting Your Nest with board-certified family medicine and obesity medicine specialist Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com. Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. If you follow this podcast, you already are aware that this podcast is based on understanding the root causes of why we get sick. I use my NEST acronym to remind us to focus on nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, our thoughts, and how to deal with and recover from previous traumas. The ROPE acronym reminds us to be in healthy relationships, to avoid harmful organisms and pollutants, and to protect our emotions. The E in the ROPE also reminds us to make sure we are having life experiences that help us achieve our goals, which is why today we will focus on the life experience of our guests, an experience that has impacted my family, an experience I hope will inspire and impact you as well. So the question is, how did I meet today's guest? Well, it started when I did research for the best high school for my two boys to receive their high school education. After reviewing our options and looking at some of the best schools in the Chicagoland area, Providence St rose as the winner. It was a jewel in the rough and reminded my wife and I of the university we both attended, which is Xavier University of Louisiana. Now, the best way to share what inspired us about this great school is by reading its mission statement, a mission statement that was recited each and every day by my sons and other students who attend this great school. Here it is. At Providence St. we believe in a creation of inspired lives produced by the miracle of hard work. We are not frightened by the challenges of reality, but believe that we can change our conception of this world and our place within it. So we work, plan, build, and dream in that order. We believe that one must earn the right to dream. Our talent, discipline, and integrity will be our contribution to a new world because we believe that we can take this place, this time, this people, and make a better place, a better time, and a better people. With God's help, we will either find a way or make one. Now imagine your son or daughter starting each day reciting these words. How could they feel? How would they feel? Would they be inspired? I would think so. That's why I thought today's guest would be exactly what we all could use to maybe get some of the same inspiration. Today's guest is Paul J. Adams III. Mr. Adams is the executive chairman and founder of Providence St. His career started with St. as the director of guidance in 1971. Ironically, I was born in 68, so quite a while ago for me. Just threw that in. Only 1 year later, he became the school's principal in 72. When financial troubles arose, he took over and founded Providence St. as an independent school in 78 and later served as the president from 96 to 2014 and was named the executive chairman in 2014. Since his leadership, they've become one of the great success stories in American education with a history of over 44 straight years of placing 100% of its graduates into colleges. You know, because of the success of the school, a documentary was made of the school, and it was entitled The Providence Effect. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to have this great man on my podcast. So, Mr. Adams, I welcome you to the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
And thank you, Dr. Hampton. I really appreciate you having me.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And before we begin, I wanted to give you a little bit of an update. I know we chatted briefly before we started, but I just want to be clear that my oldest son, Brandon, he did graduate from WashU in their undergraduate program and their graduate program. And he was focusing. A lot of people say, why didn't he become a doctor? Well, they wanted to do business. They understood that business was important in the world as well, and entrepreneurship. So he's working on a clothing business, and that's kind of where he's at. And my youngest son, who also attended Washington University in St. Louis, graduated from the undergrad and is now in the graduate program, has one more year left. So he'll be graduated in 2024. He's leaning towards healthcare administration, but he's also interested in entrepreneurship as well and hoping to start something in some type of business as well. So, for me and my family, Providence St. Mel's has delivered on their promise, the promise that you advertise on the website of getting kids into top schools. But more importantly, when they went to the school, my concern was, would they be ready, for a great school like WashU in St. Louis? And the answer is yes, they were, and they did just fine. So I really appreciate the foundation. I want to do a shout out to Jeanette Butala and Teresa Cullen and the other teachers. Like I remember Eric Hendricks and Carolyn Stopp and other educators who contributed to their great education. So let's start our conversation talking about values, because I'll be honest, I remember a story about you as a president of a school cutting the grass, and I think that was a story I heard when I was looking at the school, and I said, "What president cuts the grass of the school?" That tells me a man must have values to do such a thing. So I want to go backwards a little bit. My family's from Arkansas. My wife's from Mississippi. I want to go back to, I'm curious where those values come from. So go back to where you grew up and any life experiences that may have impacted who you are as a man today.
Well, I grew up in Alabama about 82 years ago in a very tight-knit, segregated community in a college setting. And the values there were that everyone had to do something, had to work. My father died when I was only 8 years old, and I was the oldest of four. And so one of my to be famous neighbors across the street from me, Dr. Watkins, said that when your father died, you became a man. So I really do think I became that leader in my household. And so much of that comes from that setting. Additionally, I grew up in a family where they talked about education all the time. Uh, there was no discussion about how big your house was or where you were going, because you weren't going anywhere. You were always talking about who's got a degree, who's graduated from where you're going, et cetera, et cetera. So I grew up in that environment that you knew that you were going to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was no hesitation about that at all. You're going to find a way to do that. So I get much of that. As you talk about values, it's based on that tight knit environment that I grew up in.
Yeah, I love the fact that education is something. I wish we lived in a country, and I know people listen to this all over the world, where we had universal healthcare and universal access to education. I think it should be a human right. And there's never a level playing field, but if I know I can get a degree, if I can get an education, then it'll at least make the playing field a little more level. I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't guarantee. I can't make maybe my family can't make a phone call to WashU and get me in, right? But if I'm smart enough to at least qualify to get in, I think that's going to be really key. So I really appreciate that. And I just want to live in a world where things are fair. I know they've recently passed some things with the Supreme Court that will not allow for, young folk to acknowledge, get an edge because of their background. But I just think that the playing field is not level. So we must find ways to level the playing field, because where we all start is a different starting point. So I just want to just say that out loud. I don't want to make this a political show, but I just think that whatever we can do to do that. Now, you've also had the gift, the privilege to, march with Martin Luther King. And, man, what a legendary figure, what an impactful person. So my question is, as it relates to you marching with Martin Luther King, what did that do to shape who you are? How did that impact? Well, that is a great life experience that many of us never had. So talk a little bit about the impact of that.
Well, not only did I march with Dr. King, I met Dr. King when I was 14
Mm,
as a 10th grader at Alabama Lab High School. Uh, in that same year, this is 1955, uh, the impact of Emmett Till changed my life. And in that same year, Rosa Parks sat down on the bus in Montgomery. So that is the foundation of my life as it is today. That we live on this earth to give back.
mm,
So that Dr. King has just totally impacted my life. I must tell you, when I first met him in an assembly, he was not famous.
mm,
He was just a new minister taking over Dexter from Dr. Uh, Vernon Johns, who was very famous in itself. Uh, but my first meeting him, it did something to me, and it still affects me today.
mm-hmm,
Uh, for what Dr. King did for the world, he gave his life. And for me, I didn't have to give my life. You know, I'm still around, and that is just has stuck with me all the days of my life, all the books I've read. In fact, I'm reading a new book that someone gave me for Father's Day called it's called King Alive by Jonathan
mm.
Eig, which I found out some things that I thought I knew everything about Dr. King, but his effect on me is just unbelievable. You know, as an old man, I am still just in a mute, just touched by what he did for the whole world.
I love it. Giving back is so important. In some ways, we're giving back right now by having this conversation, and so we all have ways to give back. And my way of giving back is trying to teach the world to become metabolically healthy. Your way of giving back is being this great educator, and I love the fact that 80-plus-year-old is still reading. You're still reading. And it's so important. Every time I hear successful people, they talk about how important it is to keep acquiring knowledge. And they may even want to put a book in our coffin one day because that we want to read even at that point. Just keep
Yeah,
learning and growing.
absolutely.
And it's just inspiring to know that you're still doing that. I could only imagine being involved with the civil rights movement is so important. Anything about being involved in the civil rights movement that you would like to share in terms of why that's so important?
I think my involvement is that each human being on this earth has a responsibility to making the world a better place. And I take that very seriously. I think so in the seventh grade, I had a civics course. We talked about civilization. And civilization is about moving forward. And I have kept that in mind all the days of my life. Uh, so I just think that as a human being on this earth, it is our responsibility to make the world a much better place. You don't need a committee for that. You don't have to get a thesis or write a thesis on it. Is it something that we all should do? I think we must do.
Hmm.
And when I think, let me speak a little more about the civil rights movement. When I think about the people in the civil rights movement, yeah, I was fortunate to grow. I think I was fortunate to grow up in Montgomery, Alabama, and to see Dr. King on a daily basis. And Dr. Abernathy lived a block from me. His secretary lived across the street from me. I think about the sacrifices that those people made. I mean, there was no money, there was no health insurance for them. They just lived from day to day, and those sacrifices to me means that I need to do something. I need to make some
Mm-hmm.
sacrifices. So when people ask me about, why you uh, spent so much time at Providence St. because somebody lifted me up,
Mm.
and it's my responsibility to lift someone else up.
I love it. If only each of us did a little of that, not a lot, but if everybody in the United States, everybody in the world did a little sacrificing for someone else, what would the world look like? It would look completely different.
It
I
would.
mean, it would be amazing. And I have to go there. When my kids attended Providence St. Mel's, that's one word that we all had to accept, which is sacrifice. It wasn't just my sons who had to sacrifice, it was the parents. So, for any parent out there who finds a jewel of a school like Providence St. Mel's, it doesn't end there. The sacrifice starts the moment you decide to take a journey towards a great education. So, rather it was staying up a little later than we anticipated, rather it was trying to deal with this English paper that Miss Stopka tore to pieces, and you had to write it again and again. It was the sacrifice that then led to my children, who blew my mind when they took their tests to get into college, and their scores for English were off the charts. I mean, particularly when you think about kids of color, they just don't get those kind of super high scores. They both did extremely well. So I just know that the sacrifice was really part of why that happened. Now, being a teacher in a lot of ways and an educator requires sacrifice because everybody in education is underpaid, in my opinion. And I just wonder, like you said, your family was in the education sphere. I'm assuming that it was their foundation that led to you being interested in or being inspired to be an educator. Is that true?
Well, it was kind of. I really tried to not be a teacher, but I really did. In fact, I ran a couple of businesses in between teen teaching, but it always came back in some way. Uh, it was providential that I am doing what I am doing. I'm very happy that it ended up this way. Uh, because it has brought me a tremendous amount of joy to see the graduates of our school go on to the best colleges in the United States. In fact, of the top 50 colleges in the United States, Providence St. Mel have graduated from at least 38 of them.
Wow.
Not bad, not
Not
bad.
bad. Not bad at all. Even the school my kids attended, Washington University in St. Louis. I'll give you another thought about why we chose your school. And I'm not going to name the other schools, but we looked at the top private schools in Chicago. And then when I say the top, I'm talking about the best. And I went to them and I said, I learned this from my journey to Xavier. And when I went to Xavier, I knew that it was the top school in the country to get African American kids into medical school and
Absolutely.
into pharmacy. My wife's a pharmacist. So I asked the same question. I went to these top schools and I said, show me the black men and where they've gone to school, and they just could not compete with Providence St. Mel's. It kind of blew my mind because the assumption is if you're a top school, then they're going to
You
go
assume.
to, you assume there's some, but what happened was they were going to, I wouldn't say lesser schools, but schools that weren't ranked as highly. And I just couldn't understand that. So for me, the return on investment, and by the way, Providence St. Mel's was way more affordable than those schools, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. The
Yeah.
return on investment was amazing. So now I have two young black boys, and WashU, at the last time I looked at U.S. News and World Report, they were ranked number 15 in the country, ahead of Cornell, ahead
Yeah.
of Columbia. And there's like 4,400 colleges, and to find a path. So I think there's a recipe, just like Xavier has, to get people into healthcare. You guys have a little bit of a recipe to do that. But could you share any secrets that you have in terms of how, and let's be clear, I'm a doctor, my wife's a pharmacist. My kids had a little bit of an edge in terms of having parents
Mm-hmm.
who fully understood. But yet when I travel to Providence St. Mel's in the heart of the West Side, in a neighborhood that's not regarded as necessarily safe. In fact, sometimes Garfield Park is ranked number one in terms of, crime related stats. But yet in the middle, that's why I call this school a jewel in the rough. In the middle of that environment, you will take kids from that same neighborhood and find a way to get them into these top schools. So is there any particular secret to how that's achieved?
Well, 60624 has been indicated in some publication that to be the worst zip code in the country.
Yeah.
And the very fact that that is being stated, when I came there, I made it my objective that these students were going to go to the best colleges in the United States. I just, that was my goal. And I did it very strategically by hiring the best possible people I could find. I hired those people who are content specialists, be it math, science, English, or whatever. And that they had to buy into the philosophy that these kids were going to go to the best college in the United States. So it's really not a secret. If you can find very talented people and put them in front of young people, they are going to mature, and they are going to do what is necessary to rise to the top. I often say to teachers, if you hire a dummy and put him in front of 20 students, at the end of the year you got 21 dummies. You have to be careful about who you put in front of children. I have always kept that in mind. And that is how you do it. It's not a secret. If you can get the best people, you're going to get the best results.
And it's so true. And that's not just at the level of teacher, it's at the higher level of principal, it's at the lower level of the people who are the aides. It's like everybody you surround. And I think about, I've been fortunate lately. I've worked with some great people in terms of even medical assistants who assist me. And I'll be honest, when I started working with Myra, who is my new medical assistant, what I found is that there's something inside of her who wants to be good at the job. She cares about the people that we're talking to. And what I find is that it's that approach, it's her desire to be good at this. The fact that she cares makes her a performer. And guess what? Then it turns around and inspires me. Like if I work with somebody who's not inspirational, then even the doctor has to be inspired sometimes.
That's right.
And it just feeds it. And so now we're kind of knocking it out the park. And for the first time in years, I've been able to come home and have a time to do a podcast. I'll probably have more time to do a video because I'm not spending all my time working as a doctor at home, which means I can be a better husband. I can be a better father because we knock it out the park at home. And it's really been great to do that. So I do have, I think about this 100% of the students going to those great schools. And again, you said it's very simple, right? So my question is, why is it not being duplicated in other institutions? I know there's a lot of bureaucracy and barriers. Is it the bureaucracy, or is there something else that we're not seeing?
Well, bureaucracy would be the starting point. But when I sit down and seriously talk to people about how we can do it, the first thing they tell me is too much work. You work on Saturdays, yeah. Sometimes I work on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the institution is a role model. Everybody, students, children know when you believe in them. We genuinely believe that these students can do anything that they want to do, and it's been proven over the last 50-some years that these students have gone to colleges all over the country. We even have kids going to school in Europe, in England, London, etc., etc. It is so satisfying to me that I know that if I can find someone who academically have all the talents they need and they buy into the mission of Providence St. these students are going to go to the best school. It is that simple. But to answer your question, most people say it's just too much work.
Mm-hmm.
You want people to come in on Saturday. Well, yeah, sometimes I do. You want them to come in. Yes, you don't pay for all that. We know we can't pay you enough to teach at Providence St. This is something that you need to buy into. It has to become part of your life. This is not a job. This is a life rendering career that I have chosen. And I try to find people that believe the same thing that I believe in. If they don't believe in those things, they're going to be gone in a few days.
Yeah. And I know that you're right about going beyond the borders because my oldest son, I think he was in Cambridge. We actually considered him being educated in another country because he was
Wow.
qualified to do that. But there was some fear in the family. Well, he can't be that far away and that kind of stuff. And this is what's ironic. I know we mentioned the cost of education earlier. It would have been cheaper for him to go over there than to be educated here. So what kind of country do we live in where it's cheaper for us to go to another country to be educated than in our own country? There's Houston, we have a problem. So we really do need to work on that issue.
I think cost of college education in the United States is totally ridiculous. It makes absolutely no sense. And I try to warn students, don't go out and sign up a $200,000 loan and then come back and get a $50,000 job. You
Right.
just bought yourself into poverty.
Yeah.
Uh, it doesn't make any sense at
It
all.
doesn't. It's too much of a business now, and unfortunately, uh, and again, I believe educators should be paid well. I just think that our value system hasn't allowed us to prioritize education and to make sure that the teachers are paid well, while also not putting that burden on the students who are trying to get the education. So hopefully, I will always fight for that, and I believe in that. And what I love about you is that you're just one guy, right? You're just one individual, and yet you've made a huge change. And you know, there are life experiences that help us become who we are. I'm trying to change the world by helping people heal. You're changing the world through the educational process. But then, we have this vision, and you had a school that was kind of destined to close. There was a moment in time where this school was pretty much on its last leg, and it took one person to do something about it. Now, can you think of any life experience that gave you the courage to face that challenge and to do something about it? How do you think
Well,
that?
not back. I think they're growing up in the segregated South and meeting Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy and uh, God knows all the people I met. But the true answer to that is that when the archdiocese decided to close the school, they didn't get my permission. They walked in and told me
Mm,
what they were going to do. And I had spent 8 years of my life working in that school.
hmm
And I said to my supervisor, you didn't discuss it with me. And he
hmm
turned to me and said, we didn't have to discuss it with you.
mm,
And that disrespect
hmm
is why I'm talking to you right now.
mm,
I was telling young people that if you work hard and do this and do that, we're gonna be able to do this. And then someone walked in to tell me about what I can't do. Then
mm,
I just stood up. I stood up for my children. I stood
hmm
up for the community. I stood up because I was a black man and I was just not gonna be told what I could not do.
mm,
And we started that school without a cent in the bank.
mm.
God was with us.
Woo! Now let's slow down. Let me slow down. Now, I know we have to, pay bills. So go back a little bit. My question to you is like, okay, I'm sure you had to raise funds somehow. How did you do
Oh,
that? And how do you continue to build, get money in for the school? What's that process like?
oh, that is a long, long, long process. My first board of trustees, we would have a meeting, and I would tell them, we got to pay the teachers, and there's a leak in the roof, and the chairman of the board said, "Let us pray." I said, "Well, this is not going to work." And I was a headmaster of one of the very expensive schools in Chicago. Called me one day and said, "There's a young man that is interested in doing something, and he can't work at the public school. I'm going to have him call you." And he did. We ended up being very good friends. In fact, I'm flying out to see him next month. And he put together a board of some of the most wealthiest people in Chicago. To be very, very honest about that, and that has been the, the trail that I have gone down for the last 44 years is I go out and tell people about what we're doing. I
Mm-hmm.
invite them in to see what we are doing. I want you to see what we are doing. And if I can get you in that building, I can get in your pocket.
Mm.
Now, the cost to run Providence St. in any given year is in excess of $6 million a year.
Mm. Mm.
Uh, Tuition brings in less than 2 million, so we have to raise
Wow.
$4 million a year. We
Wow.
have been very fortunate that we raised money. We have a board of trustees that are invested in the community, people who are in money marketing and stock market and et cetera, et cetera. They do investments, and we have done quite well.
Wow.
But
Well,
we started off with nothing.
oh man, 2 million. So you have a $4 million deficit every year,
Yeah,
and you have to
right,
raise that
right.
money again. Why should you have to do that? So
Well,
that, you know what I mean?
it's
That's the world. That's a problem. So so
not
so
fair.
well, it's not. And you've answered my question. When I started saying, how why are you guys a jewel in the rough? Because a lot of places won't have the opportunity to raise that kind of money, even if they wanted to, because there's a little, God in there. There's a little luck in there. There's a lot of things that have to happen, and I just think that that's a tall order. So
Well, the objective is to educate students who don't have the financial. So I mean, you kind of you set up your own hypotheses, and
right,
you have to do it. I mean,
that's
there's
right.
no way out of it. You
Yeah,
have to
you just got to
raise
do
that
it.
kind of money.
That's right. Well,
That's
that's
the
what it
objective.
is. Now, another thing about you, I talked about cutting grass, but most people would assume a president doesn't live in that neighborhood. They would assume that, but yet you do. So, what? Why did you decide to live really close to the school, stay in the neighborhood? What gave you? You've given some of that already, but it's
Yeah.
still perplexing. I mean, you just don't see that every day. I mean, even I grew up in a tough neighborhood, but I live in a suburb called Oak Park, and it's nicer, it's quieter. I hear squirrels and
Yeah.
birds chirping. So, what
Yeah.
gave you the motivation to do that?
Well, a donor came to me and said, I want to. I used to live in the convent there.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't know that, but he said, I'd like to build something for you.
Mm.
Why don't you pick out something downtown? Blah
Mm-hmm.
blah blah. And I said, I don't want to do that.
Mm.
I think we have to do something in the neighborhood. I want the students when they walk out to see me, where I live, and what I'm doing,
Mm.
because that's gonna be their goal to do better. So when they walk out of Providence St. they can see my house, the grass, the flowers, the blah blah blah. So
Yeah.
that's how that came worked out. And like I said, I'm going out to see that young man but not such a young man now, who built that home,
Mm-hmm.
27, 28 years ago.
Nice. It's a beautiful home too, and I really appreciate you. One thing I like about Garfield Park, it's got the garden nearby. It's got a nice park across the street. The greenery is wonderful, and although it has this reputation as a community of not being the safest, you wouldn't know it if you just drove by there. I mean, it just looks wonderful. And was it really ironic because I played tennis for golf. I played for Columbus Park, right?
Oh, yeah, okay.
But then when Columbus Park tennis team, when the funding became an issue, the tennis players from Columbus Park and Garfield Park had to join, and then we ended up at Garfield Park, and basically Barry Batson, who was a now deceased, he was a cop. He used to be the coach, and he was like a father figure. And so I spent a lot of time in that area. That's kind of one of the reasons I knew about the school. But I also, so it was nice to have, and then one more thing about that tennis team, believe it or not, because you combine two teams, the men's team would always win the city championship. So we became
Good.
we would play, like Rainbow Beach. They had a tennis team and they had like more resources right over there. And it was and we'd come there with our raggedy tennis rackets with, holes in our shoes, and we would still beat their players because we had a very good team. But what's really interesting about the conservatory over there, where you see the plants and the flowers, you probably see more people who didn't look like the neighborhood visiting this conservatory, which is
Absolutely.
very
Still
interesting.
true.
So, still true, I'm sure,
Still
right?
true.
So it's a beautiful place, and we need to invest in these types of places to give people. And of course, our kids play basketball, and they play basketball over there as well. So it's just nice to have that nearby. I saw a previous conversation with you, and you talked about your philosophy of education, and it was S plus L equals D. So I wanted to maybe have you touch on that a little bit.
I
S
forgot what
plus
it. What, I got what I said.
I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you what you
Okay.
said. You said it's actually funny. The S is for sit down. The other S is for shut up. The L is for listen, and that equals D, which is discipline. So it sounds like a tough approach. Did you find that disciplined approach was necessary to cultivate the kids that you currently are cultivating?
I did. I came from a very disciplined background. I went to actually, I graduated from a private school in Alabama that was really, really, really tough. And so
Mm-hmm.
much of what I have done at Providence St. is fashioned from my experiences growing up. Uh, and when I walked into Providence St. Mel, it was a pretty tough place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't get students to sit down and listen, you're not going to be able to teach them. I mean, I don't care what kind of degree you have, and they have to respect you. Unfortunately, I see what happening these days is that the students are now making decisions about their education, which I don't understand. Which is one of the problems at Providence St. Mel's. Parents say, "Well, my child hadn't made the decision." So we're kind of losing that,
Mm-hmm.
and we actually people. I don't know whether we use the word resent our discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That we are too tough on the children.
Mm-hmm.
Too much homework, and you can't. Well, I tell them this: look at the record.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All I ask you to do is to look at the record. I mean, if this is working, maybe you should try it.
And I'm okay with that. Discipline is something that seems to be lacking. Sacrifice seems to be lacking. Understanding that in order to have something in life, you must struggle seems to be lacking. So we must model for the young people that this is par for the course, as they would say on the golf course. This is what
All
it's
right.
going to take. And if that's what you want, there is nobody, I don't care if you go to Steve Harvey or whoever, who does not sacrifice and has discipline. I mean, he probably wakes up every day at 4 a.m. and goes, he has a schedule that he has to keep. And that's why he's successful. You don't just wake up and win the lottery and good things happen. That's not going to happen before a fraction of the population. So I really appreciate the discipline, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. Like, I think sometimes parents are afraid of discipline. I think as long as you treat a child with dignity and respect, but have standards that require discipline, hard work, accountability, that's okay. And that's how you turn boys into men and
Right.
girls into women. That's how you do it. So I really wanted to put that out there. I think about the school and the outlook. I know that the model requires, raising money, but what's your thoughts on the outlook of the school? Any plans for the near future, long-term future?
Yeah, I think we've already started doing this 3 or 4 years. We're looking um, much more to the computer sciences, artificial intelligence.
Mm,
In fact, we have a young man who's head of information technology at College Page, who is kind of running our program. So we uh, offer now some 6 courses in artificial intelligence. Uh, and I think if we don't start doing that, our children are not going to be employable.
mm.
AI is here and it is for
Woo,
real.
whoa.
Uh, so our elementary students are taking robotics, drone technology, uh, anything that it deals with the computer area, and more now with the AI, artificial intelligence. That is part of our goal. We're thinking about offering a dual certificate, dual diploma, uh, that those who can really qualify for the AI, that we will offer a separate diploma, which is, in
Mm-hmm.
essence, will offer employment after high school, not after
Mm.
college.
Wow.
I think we just have to be a little more practical. Everybody doesn't necessarily have to go to college. People say, "Well,
Mm-hmm.
but why do you emphasize?" I said, "Well, that was economically the way I had to go.
Mm-hmm.
That was just financially. It was easy for me to do it that way." But as I look down the road and look to the future, if our students are not uh, saturated in the math and the sciences, they are in trouble.
Yes,
And
yes.
I'm not talking about algebra and geometry. I'm talking about physics, calculus, advanced calculus, pure mathematics. In fact, I think, of course, I'm in the process of retiring, but I think the future of Providence St. I would like to see that the last 2 years of high school would be basically college level courses. I think
Mm,
that's a way to go, with a high emphasis on technology.
yeah. I also like the idea that we don't all have to take the same path. Just like my kids didn't have to become healthcare folk, they're in business now. Um, I think it's important that there are so many needs out there. Now, if you don't believe technology is not taking over, just go into your grocery store, and what happened to all the cashiers? If
They're
you go to
gone.
one, they gone, right? And that's a ton of jobs that are gone. Somebody does need to understand the technology. However, there's never going to be technology that self-sustains itself. You still need humans, but let's be willing to pivot. Let's be willing to move in a different direction so we can sustain our families. And life is really about, whether you're creating a product or a service, you need to provide value to the world. And if the world's evolving, I remember the days of Blockbuster, right? You
Right.
remember that? And they don't
Yeah,
exist anymore. So
they're
they
gone.
and if anybody had an opportunity to be a Netflix, it was Blockbuster, but they just
That's
were
right.
not willing to change, and all they had to do is change. So I really appreciate that direction. Very innovative in your thoughts. Now, if you were to give advice to a young, Mr. Adams, right? A
Mhm.
person that's now 20, they're inspired by this conversation and they really see something in front of them. They want to have it, change and impact the world. Any advice when somebody's facing a challenge in particular, right? Any advice you would give them so that they will face that challenge and not give up too soon.
Well, I think the more you read, the better off you are. Uh, I was inspired by books on Dr. King, earlier books written by Dr. Riddick, and during the movement, I read "Pardon the Waters," Taylor Branch. And there are numerous of that's Malcolm X. I mean, we could go on and on,
Mm-hmm.
but read inspiring books about what people have done, and pursue the science. Pursue the math. I mean, if we can't get around this science and math, you can be philosophical about what you don't need, but it is absolutely a necessity that we pursue the sciences and the maths.
Okay. Let me say this. What I'm hearing is read, read, and read. Now, since we talked about technology, okay, that's too much for you. Listen, listen, listen. Most books are audio while you're driving somewhere. You can listen. They have book summary organizations where you can get a book summary. I just had a conversation with a young lady who was promoted and you can tell she was stressed about her promotion. And I use this organization called soundview.com. But anyway, they take the books and they summarize. I said, well, how about this? All leaders are spewing the same information. If you go back to inspirational speakers like Dr. Jim Rohn, for example, he was an inspirational speaker, right? Well,
Right.
Anthony Robbins and
Right.
Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher, they're just recycling the same information. So it's the same stuff. So put a book in front of you. And I told her, if you're busy, it's 20 minutes in a car, learn some principles. So you'll get the knowledge. That's kind of like the science and math part, just in her field. But you also get the inspiration. Like I get so inspired. And when you're struggling, you need inspiration. You need someone to say just the right thing in the right moment to keep you going. And we all need to be inspired, which is why I wanted to have you on the podcast today. I also think about, as we wrap up, my acronym that talks about the nest and the rope. And it's really, so I want you to think about this acronym for a moment and think about what you're going to work on over the next 12 months. So when we think about the nest, we talk about nutrition. I'm all about low carb and all of that kind of stuff. Stop eating processed food and stuff like that. All about movement. And just so you know, Mr. Adams, the number one predictor of longevity is not what you eat necessarily, is having muscle. So a lot of people fall, break their hip, hit their
Mm,
head, and they leave this place early. So if you want to be here for a while. You've been here for a while. We're trying to get to
exercise.
100. Yeah, you got to move that body, right? Now, we know stress and sleep are important. That's the nest. The T is our thoughts, recovering from trauma. And then when you get down to the rope, it's the relationships. I'm happy we have a relationship. The avoiding things that can harm you, like organisms and pollutants. But the E is about our emotions and making sure life experiences service, which was the foundation of today's podcast. So when you think about nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, and all of these things, is there any area in your life you're going to give extra attention over the next 12 months?
Less stress,
Mm.
more sleep. Uh, I've been I've been I've been under stress all of my life, and I sure would like to give. But I frankly I'm going to put all of these, all of them are extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise. In fact, I have a routine for exercise for the last 2 or 3 years because I saw myself kind of
Yeah.
wobbling.
Yep.
Uh, so it along with that, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier. In my retiring days, I'm going to spend time in finance. I'm going to, and I try to instill in young people, learn how to save money.
Mm.
Uh, learn how to invest,
Mm-hmm.
learn the stock market,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I want, with the less stress and more sleep. I'm gonna go out here and learn the market.
It is the money thing is so critical. I'm actually doing something right now just for fun. So if you imagine a young person who's going to retire at 65, obviously you went past
Way
that
past
number.
that,
You
yeah.
passed that. But let's imagine that you work, from 20 to 65. That's 45 years. And the stock market has averaged about 11% over its
Right,
life, right?
right.
I just did a calculation right now. If you put $100 away every month, 11% interest for 45 years, you end up with $1.3 million.
There you go.
Now, we spend more money on the lottery and Starbucks.
Absolutely.
But if we teach our babies that early on, then all of us should retire millionaires. There's no
We
reason
could.
why that's not
There's
true.
no
So
reason why we
so
couldn't.
I, so so thank you for moving in that direction as well. I think you guys are on social media. I think I saw you guys on Facebook,
Well, we on
Providence,
Facebook, Instagram, all of those.
all that stuff. So
Yeah,
we'll
we have
have
website.
we'll make sure there's links to all of that. We'll probably even share this conversation there as well. And of course, there's the Providence St. Mel's website, which I think is PMSnow, if
.com.
that's correct, .com. Okay, so we'll put that link.
PSMnow.com. Right.
That's what we'll do. That way people can kind of take a look at what you guys are up to, see some of those beautiful success stories. But more importantly, I was looking forward to this conversation. Again, you've had a tremendous impact on our lives. Who knew that a guy living in a suburb not far from the school, paying all these taxes, would not take advantage of the high school in the town we're in, but would go into the inner city where I grew up. And I grew up on Costner and Jackson, not
Oh,
far from
not
the
far.
school, not far from the school. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood. I've always had my heart there, and I know there are some wonderful people on the west side of Chicago. If people would only meet them and greet and get a chance to know them. So, but one of the
Right.
great people is yourself. And I love the work you've done. I appreciate you sharing your story, and I hope we continue our relationship. I know we follow each other on Facebook, etc. So we'll keep doing it. And thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast, my friend.
Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. God bless you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. And for those who enjoyed this episode today we focus on the E and the ROPE acronym, which reminds us to focus on our life experiences. But thankfully, the life experiences of others can also greatly impact our lives. That's why I am so thankful that Mr. Adams was able to join us. He gave us a glimpse into his life experiences. My hope is that some of those experiences will inspire you to do some of the things that may make your life better, may shape who you become, because our life experiences is who we become. Literally, he shared that being exposed to great leaders like Martin Luther King, Dr. King, shaped who he became. So hopefully, after this episode, you've become more inspired, hopefully more courageous. Obviously, we want you to be disciplined, and if we go back to that mission statement, we're gonna work, plan,
Man, Bill,
build, and dream,
in that
and
order.
and we're gonna just do that because that's gonna be the key. So I'm so happy that Mr. Adams shared his story. I hope it inspired you. I thank you for coming to this episode, and we're gonna continue to bring more inspiration. Rather, we're talking about nutrition, life experiences, relationships, and we're gonna keep building the experiences that are going to help us be successful in life. So thank you again for checking out this episode of Protecting Your Nest podcast. And until the next episode, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest. You've been listening to Protecting Your Nest with Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com.